Cancelled stuff and Spider-Man, some of my favorite things to talk about. This'll be fun. So it looks like Sony's Marvel Universe is finally finding their footing. Venom came out to financial success in 2018, and it'll continue with the upcoming Venom Let There Be Carnage, Morbius, even Kraven the Hunter's getting a movie. Not to mention Into the Spider-Verse and its upcoming sequel. But this actually wasn't Sony's first attempt at starting a cinematic universe in the same vein as Marvel Studios. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was meant to set up a cinematic universe, with the focus of that movie being more on that than it was being a sequel to Amazing Spider-Man, which led to it getting mixed reviews, which led to it being the lowest grossing Spider-Man movie, which led to Sony making a deal with Marvel Studios, allowing Spider-Man to appear in the MCU, which led to every sequel and spin-off to Amazing Spider-Man 2 being cancelled. And with that being said, let's get into what these sequels and spin-offs were going to be. I didn't imagine there would be much. I remember reading about Amazing Spider-Man 3 and 4 as well as Sinister Six back when all this was still in development, but it turns out the rabbit hole goes a little deeper. So the first one is, of course, The Amazing Spider-Man 3. So Sony announced before Amazing Spider-Man 2 was released that Amazing Spider-Man 3 would be coming out June 10th, 2016, as well as Amazing Spider-Man 4 coming out May 4th, 2018. The Amazing Spider-Man 3 would have involved Peter Parker, still grieving after the loss of Gwen, and it would have allegedly featured certain characters and storylines that were cut from Amazing Spider-Man 2, such as the introduction of Mary Jane, played by Shailene Woodley, as well as the reveal that Norman Osborn's head was being kept frozen in the basements of Oscorp, setting up his resurrection. Speaking of resurrection, according to Dennis Leary, who played Gwen's father, the film would have also featured Peter Parker attempting to resurrect his dead loved ones, meaning it's safe to assume that characters such as Uncle Ben and Gwen would have returned as well. So after Amazing Spider-Man 2 was released, Amazing Spider-Man 3 was delayed to 2018, and Amazing Spider-Man 4 was delayed to a later, unknown, unspecified date. Pretty much nothing is known about what the fourth one would have been about, even before the Amazing Spider-Man series was cancelled. Both Mark Webb and Andrew Garfield made it clear that they weren't sure about doing a fourth movie. So those were the two direct sequels to Amazing Spider-Man 2 that were cancelled. So now, let's get into the spin-offs. The first one, which is pretty well known, is Sinister Six. After the seeds were planted in Amazing Spider-Man 2, a Sinister Six movie was meant to be released on November 11th, 2016. From what I recall, I don't believe Spider-Man was going to be a part of this movie, and if he did, he wouldn't have that big a role. I just remember thinking that was such a stupid idea. Like, why would you do Sinister Six without Spider-Man? So this canceled Sinister Six movie would have allegedly been a redemption story. It's safe to assume that if these villains were going to headline their own movie and not be battling Spider-Man in it, then they would have been portrayed more as anti-heroes than the villains we're used to them being. Unfortunately, the Sinister Six lineup for this movie was never confirmed, but thanks to the end credits of Amazing Spider-Man 2, fans had been able to figure it out. So the team in this canceled Sinister Six movie would have consisted of Green Goblin, Vulture, Rhino, Doc Ock, Kraven, and either Mysterio or Chameleon. This last one's not as obvious as the others. All of that being said, this movie just sounded lame to me. I genuinely was not that excited for it in the slightest. So I wasn't really all that disappointed when it ended up being canceled. It meant the Sinister Six could pop up somewhere else, like, you know, a Spider-Man movie. Luckily, it seems like we'll finally be getting the Sinister Six versus Spider-Man in No Way Home, so that's a happy ending to the story of this canceled movie. Next up is Venom, or at least the original version. So this original version of Venom was going to be directed by Alex Kurtzman, who co-wrote Amazing Spider-Man 2. A title being considered for this one was Venom Carnage, but according to leaked emails, Carnage was going to appear in another movie. We'll get to that later. So this Venom movie was rumored to be based on the Ultimate Spider-Man version of the character, in which the symbiote is not alien, but created by the fathers of Peter Parker and Eddie Brock as a cure for cancer. The folks at Sony were also unsure of whether Spider-Man was to be involved in this movie or not, but as we all know, Venom ended up being the first movie in the new Sony Marvel Universe. But there was a time where Venom could have been set in the Amazing Spider-Man universe, and we could have seen him come face to face with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. So next up is a female-led film, which was being written by Lisa Joy, who's known for working on shows such as Westworld. The film was believed to have focused on either Black Cat or Silver Sable. It's assumed that Felicity Jones would have reprised her role as Felicia Hardy, which she was also expected to do in Amazing Spider-Man 3. There was a point where a team-up movie between these two characters was in development. It was going to be called Silver and Black, but this didn't happen until after Spider-Man had debuted in Civil War, plus the film ended up being unproduced anyway, which is why I felt the need to mention it here. Other potential characters this movie could have focused on include Stunner, Firestar, or Spider-Woman. I'm honestly surprised Spider-Woman wasn't their first choice. I feel like that movie would have some potential. So here's where we start getting to more obscure stuff that really didn't go beyond the planning phase. All of this was apparently discovered when Sony Pictures emails were hacked back in 2014. I'm not sure how legit all of these are, but I came across them while I was doing research for this video, so I decided to include them. So Sony wanted to do a film on Spider-Man 2099, aka Miguel O'Hara. Allegedly the film was meant to be a Captain America-style period piece, set in the year 2099. At the end, Miguel O'Hara would somehow time travel back to the 2010s, setting him up for an appearance in a big Avengers-style crossover film with Spider-Man characters. Speaking of which, let's talk about that crossover film. I mentioned Carnage earlier, and he was meant to be the antagonist of this team-up movie. This Avengers-style team of Spider-Man characters would have included Spider-Man, Peter Parker, Spider-Man 2099, Black Cat, Venom, and God knows who else. It could have been really interesting to see, but there's not much info out there on this one. There was even brief talks of doing a sequel to Spider-Man 2099 set after the Carnage team-up movie. Apparently Scorpion was going to be the villain of that movie. I'm glad that didn't happen. Just save him for the MCU. You've already got him set up there. There was another rumor that they wanted to do an Aunt May solo movie in which he was a secret agent or something. Jesus Christ, they were really reaching for straws there, weren't they? And finally, I really get a kick out of this one. A brand new Spider-Man trilogy was also being discussed, in which they would reboot Spider-Man again, and get this, have Sam Raimi return to direct this trilogy. That right there just sounds like pure desperation on Sony's part to return to the glory days, am I right? And that about does it. That is every single canceled sequel and spin-off meant to be set in the Amazing Spider-Man universe that I'm aware of. Spider-Man finally ended up going to the MCU. Sony eventually did get to start their own cinematic universe, and if No Way Home plays out the way most people think it will, then these worlds might end up colliding. And I think that's what's truly best for all fans at large. So which one of these canceled movies was most interesting to you? Are there any that you wish we would have gotten? Is there anyone out there that would have preferred to see Amazing Spider-Man 3 instead of Spider-Man join the MCU? If you have any opinion that relates to the topic of this video, please share it in the comments below. I'd love to know what my fellow fans think of all this. Also, let me know what else you'd like to see a video on. I really enjoy talking about lost or canceled media, so if there's one in particular you're fond of, let me know what it is in the comments, and who knows, I might just make a video on it. And that is all I've got for today. Stay frosty, all you beautiful people, and have a great one.